Hi everyone. My team and I, we're gonna go ahead and talk about our replicated study, which is related to the effects of video self-evaluation and task analysis on yoga posture. I'm gonna briefly introduce my team members, Jen Dyer, Johanna, myself, Kaylee, Rathi, and Stephanie. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to Rathi as she will be going over the original study and literature review.
Hello everyone. Our replication project was based on the original study, The Effects of Video Self-Evaluation on Skill Acquisition with Yoga Postures by Holly Elizabeth Downs. The purpose of the study is to enhance the skills in practicing yoga using video self-evaluation and video feedback procedure. For our replication project, we use video self-evaluation to enhance skills in practicing yoga. The study used multiple baseline across behaviors, that is the yoga poses, with 2 participants. For the baseline, the researcher acted as a model for the first 2 sessions, and the participants continued throughout for the other sessions. For intervention, participants viewed their video and evaluated their pose using task analysis to score each of the other poses. The poses chosen for intervention were tree pose, downward dog, and warrior poses. After percentage of accuracy with increase in tree pose, the intervention was applied to downward dog and then to warrior poses. Results of the study showed that video self-evaluation resulted in marked increase in the percentage of accuracy in both the participants. The dependent variable used in the study was the percentage of accuracy of yoga posture. Yoga is an ancient practice dating back thousands of years which originated from the East. There are numerous health benefits to practicing yoga. For research purposes, the effects of yoga was compared with other forms of exercises such as cycling, jogging, and walking. Yoga was found to be more effective in 22 out of 32 components, including fatigue, menopausal symptoms, kidney function, sleep disturbance, and cholesterol levels. Many researchers have shown that yoga has better health benefits when practiced regularly than other forms of exercises. One form of yoga, the Hatha yoga, includes breathing exercises, postures, and meditation. In spite of the numerous health benefits of practicing yoga, many people get hurt in practicing them. A famous New York Times article, When Yoga Hurts, discussed the potential harmful effects of practicing yoga. Often the classes where yoga is taught are too large and there are practical difficulties in getting feedback. Googling yoga injuries gives us many articles. Results from international survey shows that 1 in 4 practicing yoga were injured due to improper and inadequate instructions given to students. Hence, there's a need for practicing yoga poses accurately. There were multiple procedures to promote skill acquisition and productivity in sports and fitness. Some of the interventions used include coaching packages, use of visual cues, contingent musical reinforcement, additional shift training, goal setting, and public goal posting. The independent variable chosen for improving the accuracy of yoga poses in the study was video self-monitoring. Videos are one of the efficient and cost-effective ways to receive feedback. The effects of video modeling have been shown in multiple studies. Video have been proven to be effective and increase amount of instructor and self-monitored feedback. In the original study, assessed video procedures on acquisition and retention of set and serve volleyball skills in group design. One group used video modeling with verbal cues from instructors, and the second group received verbal feedback while watching videos of their own behaviors. The results showed higher acquisition with the expert modeling group than the self-modeling group. In another study by Boyer, which examined the effectiveness of video treatment package, include modeling and feedback on acquisition of 3 gymnastic skills and multiple baseline across behavior design. There was a clear increase in skill set acquisition with the introduction of video treatment package. With the concerns in injury in practicing yoga, there is a need for behavior analysts to evaluate procedures for enhancing skill acquisition in injuries, which has increased. Kaylee would go over the methods of replication used in our study.
All right, so for our study, the participants, us, included 5 female online graduate students. 2 of us had prior yoga experience of varying levels, and the other 3 participants had no prior experience. None of us had any injuries or physical limitations that restricted our range of movement. The poses were recorded in our location of choice with a quiet, open environment, minimal distractions, and space for the participants, us, to move around into the 3 poses. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about the materials we used. So we all use laptops with a web camera and video capabilities, or the MacBook with photo booth, and the 5th participant used a Windows computer to record videos. Laptops were placed on a stable surface like a stool or a table in order to reduce any shaking or movement of the camera and to capture a clear video of the postures. All participants had access to YouTube and or Google Drive to upload, share, and watch the videos. Each participant used their choice of a yoga mat or towel to reduce slide during the flow of the poses. Next, Stephanie will discuss our behavior definitions for each of the poses.
Like mentioned earlier, each person in the group participated in 3 different poses. Each pose had a different behavior definition, which I will be going more into detail while walking you through one of our typical sessions through the task analysis. Both the tree pose and the warrior pose consisted of 15 steps to implement the pose correctly, while the downward dog pose only consisted of 10 steps. Next, I will be walking you through our typical session, like I mentioned, through our task analysis. Jen is the participant that we will be observing through the task analysis, and she was one of the participants that knew more of yoga, and so she did a really great job in showing us this. So the first step, as per the task analysis, is to begin by standing on the mat with the big toes 2 to 3 inches apart, keeping the legs close together. The second step is to grab the ankle while bringing right or left leg up, bringing the bottom of the foot into the navel area. Step 3, release leg with the hand and bring hands to grip hip. Step 4, press right foot into the thigh while balancing on the left foot. Step 5, put arms down to the sides to straighten them up and then pull them up above head. Step 6, keep arms above the head with palms facing parallel to each other. Look up towards the ceiling or face the wall. Step 7 is to hold the position for at least 30 seconds. Step 8, after 30 seconds has passed, bring hands down and foot down to previous placement on the floor. Step 9, grab ankle while bringing left or right leg up, bringing the bottom of the foot into the navel area. Step 10, release leg with hand and bring hands to hip grip hips. Step 11, press left foot into thigh while balancing on the right foot. Step 12, put arms down to the side, straighten them and pull them up above head. Step 13, keep arms above head with palms facing parallel to one another. Look up towards the ceiling or face the wall. Step 14, hold position for at least 30 seconds. And step 15, after 30 seconds has passed, bring hands down and foot down to the previous placement on the floor. I will go ahead and show you a video of how Ben did this. The next pose that we worked on was the warrior pose. And I will go ahead and read you what Jen is going to be doing in this warrior pose as well through the task analysis. She will be standing at the front of the mat with the big toes 2 to 3 inches apart and arms relaxed at sides. Step 2, move right or left leg back behind hips with 2 to 3 foot separation with feet. Step 3, move right foot such that both feet make a 90-degree angle, keeping the front of the foot at the front of the mat. Step 4, bend front knee towards the front of the mat. Step 5, reach out left arm ahead towards the front of the mat and right arm towards the back of the mat, while keeping back straight and aligned. Step 6, keep shoulders down and in line with arms with palms facing down towards the floor and head facing towards the front of the mat. Step 7, stay in pose for at least 30 seconds. After 30 seconds have passed, bring arms down and back leg forward to once again stand at the front of the mat. Step 9, move left leg back behind the hips with 2 to 3 foot separation. Step 10, move left or right foot such that both feet make a 90-degree angle, keeping the front of the foot at the front of the mat. Step 11, bend front knee towards the front of the mat. Step 12, reach out right arm ahead towards the front of the mat and then left arm towards the back of the mat while keeping back straight and aligned. Step 13, keep shoulders down and in line with arms with palms facing down towards the floor and head facing towards the front of the mat. Step 14, stay in the pose for at least 30 seconds. And step 15, after 30 seconds has passed, bring arms down and back leg forward to once again step at the front of the mat. Here is Jen demonstrating this. The last pose that we implemented was the downward dog pose, which she will be showing you after I read this task analysis to you. She's going to start the position sitting on the mat with her legs under the hips with calves on the floor parallel to the longer part of the mat. Step 2, put hands on the mat, palms side down with top of the fingers parallel to the shortest part of the mat with fingers spread apart and wrists parallel to shorter side of the mat. Step 3, exhale and lift knees so that thighs are perpendicular to the floor and under the hips with back parallel to floor. Keep fingers separated with palms shoulder width apart and slightly in front of the shoulder. Step 4, lift feet and tuck toes under on the mat such that feet are perpendicular to the floor with knees still on mat. Step 5, position pelvis towards feet, keeping palms face down on the mat, stretching arms. Step 6, gently lift pelvis in the air, stretching hamstrings and keeping palms and toes placed on the mat. Do not lock knees. Step 7, straighten back first while keeping knees bent. Step 8, once back is straight, straighten legs while keeping head in line with back. Keep shoulders apart. Step 9, keep position for at least 1 minute. And step 10, once the minute has passed, Bring knees down to the mat and exhale. So as you can see, Jen was able to keep this pose for 1 minute. After the minute was done, we went ahead and collected data while we were doing this, but my partner Kaylee will be speaking more on that data collection and what it looked like to collect data for a typical session that looks just like what you guys have just seen.
So each of us as participants took videos of our sessions with our laptop or camera. Each participant was assigned a primary researcher and a secondary researcher, and they sent the video of themselves per session for every session. The participant was responsible for saving copies of other sessions and that their primary and secondary researchers were able to access those videos. Then the researchers scored each session using a task analysis data sheet, which I'm going to show you on the next slide. The secondary researcher also scored about 1/3 to 32% of the participant sessions in order to assess and observe improvement. The task analysis steps were marked as either correct or incorrect with a plus or minus, and those were the steps that Stephanie just showed us. And a percentage correct was calculated by dividing the number of correct steps by the number of total steps in the task analysis and then multiplying that by 100. The next slide will show you the task analysis data sheets. And these just have all the steps that Stephanie read to you. And then the researcher would watch the video and score in the second column whether the participant had correctly done those steps. Next, Jen is going to discuss the research design for our study.
So our research design was a multiple baseline design across behaviors. And the 3 behaviors that we targeted were the tree pose, the warrior 2 pose, and the down dog pose. For our baseline phase, the original study, the researcher acted as the model during the baseline phases, but for our replication, we decided to use video models from YouTube since it wasn't possible for all of us to meet in person. During baseline, the participant watched the video models without sound while taking a video of themselves attempting all 3 poses. All participants agreed to completing at least 3 sessions of baseline recording before acting as the researcher and scoring their participants' videos. This was done to limit exposure to the task analysis until participants were ready to move into the intervention phase. The treatment phase was begun after achieving stable baseline, and we started with the first pose, which was the tree pose. During treatment phase, participants continued to watch the video model while they recorded themselves attempting each pose. After finishing the recording, the participants watched their own recording and evaluated themselves using the task analysis for that pose. Participants then sent their video and their self-evaluation scores to their assigned primary researcher, who also evaluated the participant using the task analysis as well as an assigned secondary researcher for IOA data. Our mastery criteria was 70% or higher for 3 days in a row or 3 days of an increasing trend. After mastery criteria was reached for the first pose, the participant then applied the intervention to the second pose. And then after mastery criteria was met for the second pose, the intervention was applied to the last pose. So treatment fidelity was calculated by taking the percentage of agreement between the participant's self-evaluation score and the primary researcher's evaluation score. The original study included an additional phase of video feedback to improve treatment fidelity as needed. This involved the researcher and the participant going over the task analysis together while viewing the video of the session and discussing how to score each step in the task analysis. As a group, we discussed how we would implement this phase if it was needed, but luckily we felt that our treatment fidelity data was high enough that it wasn't necessary. For IOA, it was calculated by taking the percentage of agreement between the primary researcher and the secondary researcher. This was done for approximately 33% of sessions. Our IOA data ranged from 42 to 100% with an average of 83.46%. The table you see on the slide shows our assignments between the participant, the primary researcher, and the secondary researcher. Next, Stephanie will discuss our results.
Our results showed that the introduction of video self-evaluation and task analysis resulted in an increase of accuracy of yoga postures for all of the participants. It can also be noted that there was some skill acquisition in the longer baseline phases. And what this means is that because the participant had to do all 3 poses each session, regardless of whether they were in baseline or intervention phase, they may have acquired more skills and perfected those poses before it was time for the intervention. You will be able to see this in some of the participants' graphs for the last pose, which was a downward dog, because the baseline for the pose was much longer. Given we were doing a multiple baseline across behaviors design, the percentage of correct steps increased as the participant became more accustomed and more comfortable with the yoga poses. Another thing to note from our results is that the video self-evaluation allowed for participants to video record themselves practicing the pose, and they were immediately able to review to see whether where they could improve. The fact that we were allowed to view our videos before sending them out was a positive and negative thing, as improvements, as we were able to see what we needed to improve on for the next session, but we were still required to send the video to the researcher, which at times could be frustrating since you knew what you were sending was not a 100% product or 100% correct. I will now walk you through some of our results and graphs obtained by our participants. This is Jen, and Jen was one of the participants that knew more about yoga and the poses we were working with. You can clearly see how fast she was able to implement the steps on the task analysis as soon as the intervention was introduced. So as you can see, she was able to move on to the next phase quickly after intervention was introduced, as she kept a consistent 100% for each of the phases. She also was able to have a really good baseline and treatment range and mean for all 3 poses. Johanna, in her results, we can also see how quickly the introduction of the task analysis increased her results. You can also begin to notice from hers and Jen's poses, and you will notice in the other ones as well, that warrior pose was one of the more difficult poses to do baseline on, and a lot of us scored really low, but once the task analysis was introduced, we were able to increase our data points. For Kaylee, similar to Jen, Kaylee also knew a thing or two about yoga, and this can be seen in the way she quickly increased her scores soon after being introduced to the task analysis. She was also able to stay very consistent with her intervention phase. As you can see, she stayed on the hundreds in the top for all of her phases, which was really cool to see. So our next person was Rathi. Rathi did really well in the video self-evaluation as well, and the task analysis. As you can see, she wasn't able to get to the 100% like some other people did, but you can definitely see that there has been an increase in the trend and just the variability of her graphs. But this will be mentioned later through our limitations, but like in many studies, things don't always go as planned, and there could be misunderstandings. And Rathi worked on the downward dog before the warrior pose, as the other people in the research study worked on. But she still did a great job at having the intervention and the task analysis increase her results, which was good to see because that's what we were looking for. The last participant on here is me. I also was able to increase my data when the task analysis was introduced. It started off kind of mid, and then towards the end, I was able to increase it to a higher score. I unfortunately was not able to work on the increasing data or the intervention for downward pose, but I did see, as noted earlier, that my pose began to increase even without the intervention as I became more comfortable working on the pose itself. Up next, we're going to have Johanna with limitations.
All right, so based on the original study, it was reported that the participants' level of practice with yoga was somewhat challenging for them, as they were unfamiliar with the yoga poses or they were not skilled enough, in which it can result in failure to perform with fidelity. And something that the participants from this replicated study also agreed on is that it was also a limitation due to some of the group members either lack of knowledge and skill of yoga that resulted in lower performance of a specific pose or overall in general of yoga. And also it was expressed by some of the group members a dissatisfaction or discouragement due to their lack of skill with yoga, and that the results were going to be lower than those whom have more experience with yoga. Another limitation for this study is that if yoga it wasn't an extracurricular activity that the participants practiced occasionally, then it was difficult to have maintenance data. And of course, without the maintenance data, this may require retraining of skills for the group members or as a refresher, in which it occurred in the study with one of the participants. Another limitation for this replicated study is that some group members were getting more familiar with the task analysis, like Stephanie mentioned, that she felt more comfortable in performing the poses several times during baseline, that she started perfecting the skill more and more. Another limitation was that having the researcher also being a participant may have been a little biased due to either underscoring or overscoring their own data or skill. And also, lastly, another limitation would have been that sometimes research doesn't always go as planned, and there was just some confusion in the order of the poses that was performed during the study. Overall, this research may have required more additional preliminary training when it came to modeling yoga poses, as some participants were unfamiliar with yoga or had never practiced yoga. It may have been ideal to implement some preliminary training in order to have higher successful rates that may contribute to maintaining the skill for a longer period of time. So lastly, we're going to discuss about conclusions, and I'm going to hand over the mic to Stephanie.
All right. So as you can see in our findings, the study revealed that VSC can be an effective strategy to increase the individual's performance regardless of fitness level. And Johanna kind of touched on this. We were able to see that our strategy was able to help others increase with just the introduction of the intervention, increase their their work or their performance, regardless of whether, two people who knew yoga and three people who did not know yoga were able to still accomplish an increase in their trend and an increase in their performance, regardless of where they were at. The second conclusion that we came up with is that the effectiveness of VSC and task analysis can be dependent on the individual, and this has a lot to do with the motivation that one has to do right, or to do the poses correctly. I think it's very dependent on if the individual wants to accomplish, then they will be able to read the task analysis better and make sure that they're accomplishing each task according to plan. The third one is that, as many other research studies, there is more research needed to substantiate the findings. As we heard Johanna mention with some of our limitations, we would need more research to really see if VSC is in fact the best or the most effective strategy to increase an individual's performance. So next, we just have our references. We have what we worked on through our literature review, and also our project or presentation. And yeah, we thank you so much for listening and for staying in tune. And thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.